She's convenient. That's what he said about me. It was never supposed to be like this. I wasn't supposed to be the placeholder, the one who fills the silence between chapters of someone else's life. But somehow, I found myself standing on the edge of a truth that cut deeper than any lie ever could. She's convenient. That's what he said about me. I heard it from Angela, who heard it from Marcus, who definitely heard it from him. And while that tangled web of whispers would usually make me question its authenticity, something in my gut told me it was true. Not because I trusted Angela or even Marcus, but because I knew him. And the thing about knowing someone deeply is that sometimes you sense the truth before it's spoken. I met Jacob on a windy afternoon in October. He was leaning against a brick wall outside the bookstore where I worked, his curls disheveled, eyes lost in a paperback copy of Bukowski. He looked like he belonged on a movie poster, or maybe in someone else's life. Not mine. He asked if we sold coffee. I said no, but I had a thermos full of hazelnut brew and he could have a cup. That's how it started. Quiet, innocent, and far too easy. For the first few weeks, we lived in a bubble of spontaneity and coffee breaks. He liked his eggs runny and hated the sound of clocks ticking. I liked how he smelled like rain and cigarettes, even though I didn't smoke. He wrote poetry on napkins and left them in my apron pockets. I thought I was falling in love. Maybe I was. Maybe I just wanted to believe I was. He never asked much about me. He never needed to. I offered pieces of myself like free samples at a grocery store, hoping he'd take a bite and come back for more. But Jacob wasn't like that. He was always elsewhere, even when he was with me. He moved in after 2 months, said he needed a place to stay just for a while. I had a couch and a soft heart. Of course I said yes. He didn't bring much, just a duffel bag, a half-dead succulent, and a box of old records. We made love on cold nights and watched indie films on Sundays. He said I made the best grilled cheese he'd ever had. He called me Sunbeam once. Then never again. He kissed me like he was searching for something. I let him look. The problem with being convenient is that it feels a lot like being wanted, until it doesn't. I noticed the shift slowly, like a room getting darker one flickering light at a time. He stopped making eye contact when he talked, stopped laughing at my bad puns, stopped leaving notes. He'd disappear for hours with no explanation. I never asked where he went. I didn't want to sound jealous or clingy. I wanted to be the girl who didn't make things complicated. I wanted to be easy, and that's how I became convenient. It wasn't until Angela stopped by the shop one afternoon, clutching her coffee like it held the last drop of mercy on earth, that the words left her mouth and burned a hole through my chest. He said, "You're convenient," she said, eyes wide with hesitation. Like, dependable, you know? Not in a good way, more like temporary. I nodded like I'd heard it before. Maybe I had, in the silences, in the way his eyes wandered, toward the door even when he was sitting next to me. I went home that night and stared at him across the table. He was scrolling through his phone, probably texting someone who wasn't me. I watched his thumbs move like they were dancing. "I heard something today," I said quietly. He looked up, not startled, not guilty, just tired. "Yeah?" "I heard that I'm convenient." He blinked slowly, then set his phone down. "Who told you that?" "Does it matter?" He sighed. Look, I didn't mean it like that. But he didn't deny it. He didn't say it was false. He stood up and walked toward the window. "You've always been stable, easy to talk to. Chill. I like being around you." Stable, easy, chill, convenient. I waited for him to say more, to fix it, to say he loved me. But he didn't. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and said he needed some air. I didn't follow. That night, I packed his things while he was gone. I folded his shirts like I was burying them. I placed the dead succulent gently in the box. I even rewound his records and taped the flaps shut. When he came back, his key no longer fit the lock. I left a note on the door. You always said you liked honesty. Here's mine. I am not your convenience. The weeks that followed were gray and quiet. I didn't cry, not at first. I reorganized my books, scrubbed the kitchen, deleted our pictures from my phone. I told myself I was okay, but healing doesn't come in straight lines. It loops and doubles back and ambushes you when you least expect it. Like when a certain song plays on the radio, or when someone orders hazelnut coffee and smiles the way he used to. I saw him once, a few months later, walking down 3rd Street with someone new. She laughed loudly and tossed her hair. He looked at her the way he never looked at me. For a second, I felt the sting. But then I remembered the way my apartment felt now, clean, quiet, mine. I remembered the silence that no longer begged for his return. I was no longer the placeholder. I was the story. And if he ever told her I was convenient, I hope she asks him what he meant. I hope she watches the way his mouth stutters and fails. To explain the parts of me he never took the time to understand. Because I wasn't convenient. I was kind. I was loyal. I gave without asking. I loved without conditions. And that doesn't make me weak. That makes me powerful. He lost someone rare and called it easy. That's on him. A year later, I opened a small cafe near the bookstore. I named it Sunbeam & Co. Bars after the name he used once and never again. It reminded me of how even fleeting moments can birth something lasting. People came for the pastries but stayed for the peace. My regulars became my friends. My walls were covered in art. My shelves filled with stories. I played vinyl on lazy afternoons. Sometimes Bukowski, sometimes Bowie, and every once in a while someone would ask, "Is there a story behind the name?" I'd smile and say, "There is." But I had to live it to tell it right. They'd nod, satisfied, and I'd return to the counter, knowing I was finally the main character of my own story. Not convenient, not temporary, just enough.